Welcome to Sweden. In Sweden, this part of the world, we have snow. Sometimes a lot of snow. This is not a lot of snow, it's only snow, but further north from where we are now, several months of the year, it could be quite a lot of snow. A meter, 1.5, depending on the situation. This year there's a lot of snow up there, and in many cases a tracked vehicle is something that's only way to travel through snow compared to wheeled vehicles, but there's a lot of arguing about that, so we can leave that. But a tracked vehicle in snow is something that is very special. And if you take an ordinary APC like this one with a weight of approximately 10-11 tons, you have a ground pressure with the tracks on the ground, so you can travel in normal terrain and even soft ground without getting stuck. But when you travel with this kind of tracked vehicle on snow, you can travel up to maybe 1 meter deep of snow. If it gets deeper, you can get into trouble, since when the vehicle is traveling through the snow, you build up underneath the belly of the vehicle and you build up snow, so all of a sudden you are standing on a layer of snow and the tracks, they are in the air, and then you are stuck, so you have a lot of problems getting out of there if it's too much snow. This vehicle has not so wide tracks and the ground not that long, but you have approximately the same ground pressure compared to Centurion tank, which is 5 times heavier, but then you have wider tracks and they are also longer. So depending on the width of the track, you get the ground pressure to the ground. And this is something that's really important in snowy conditions. If you're traveling and you are supposed to be fighting in snowy conditions, you can go on skis like the Finnish soldiers did during the Second World War when they defeated the Soviet army in Finland. The Soviet army, they were depending on traveling on the roads with their vehicles, and the Finnish soldiers, they went on skis beside the roads and could attack them from a place where the Soviet vehicles could not reach them. And that's something that also Sweden learned, how to use this combat situation. And with long distances it's a bit tricky, because if you go on skis for a long distance, you get exhausted before you get to the battle zone. So you have to be able to travel from where you are to the battle zone and not get exhausted from the beginning. So you need to have a vehicle that can travel in the snowy condition and even on top of the snow. So after the Second World War, Sweden bought a lot of M29 Weasel from the US, a tracked vehicle that could travel in snowy condition, and that was something that's very useful. In the late 1960s, Volvo came up with the articulated full tracked vehicle, the BV202, which was a great success, and that was used in many units in Sweden, infantry units, cavalry units, traveling in tough conditions, and it can travel on top of the snow. So this kind of vehicle can travel up to maybe 1 meter of snow. Above that, with the snow depth is maybe 1.5 meter, this is stuck. But with a full tracked vehicle that doesn't have the same weight and you have wider tracks, you can go on top of the snow. And that's the advantage of that kind of vehicle. And from the BV202, which was a success, during the 1970s the Swedish Army wanted to have more vehicles and a more modern version. So Hägglunds in Örnsköldsvik got the contract, and they came up with the vehicle in the early 1980s. And the result is this, the Hägglunds BV206. And in my opinion, it's the best tracked vehicle in the world. It's absolutely astonishing. It was developed during the 1970s, and in 1979 the Swedish Army ordered 4,500 of these vehicles for the Swedish Army. In a total, over 11,000 were produced to approximately 20 different countries. So they have been used everywhere in the world. And I had a colleague that actually went with a BV206 to Antarctic, to the South Pole. How cool is that? With this kind of vehicle. So it can travel almost everywhere. And it does it with the low ground pressure. Due to the wide tracks, and it's quite long, the ground pressure is 0.12 kilos per square centimeter, which is not much compared to Centurion. You have 0.95 on the same area. So a Centurion tank on the ground is almost 10 times heavier. And you can see the result if you're going in soft ground or on snow. So this vehicle can travel on top of the snow. And the ground pressure is approximately the same as a person on skis who also goes on top of the snow. So it's very capable on traveling in snowy conditions. Inside the vehicle you have a Ford V6 2.8 liter petrol engine, developed and used during the 1960s and 70s, and it was used in the Ford Granada car, for example. Combined with the Mercedes-Benz automatic 4-speed gearbox, and also it has low and high range. Top speed is astonishing, 55 kilometers an hour, which is not very much, but the speed is not for this vehicle. It's the capability of traveling anywhere. So, well, 55 is enough, but it could be a bit more. With 160 liters petrol in the fuel tanks and a fuel consumption of about 10 liters per kilometer, you get approximately, depending on the terrain and how much load you have in the vehicle, about 200 kilometers in one tank. So you need to fill this up with extra fuel because of the fuel consumption. That was one of the drawbacks with this vehicle when you're traveling in deep snow with a lot of weight inside, and it could be up to maybe 15 liters per kilometer, which is quite a lot. The weight is about 4.5 tons, 4,500 kilos, and that's empty, and you can load 2,000 kilos in the front section and in the rear and on top of the rear cabin. So in total 6.5 tons, which is not a lot compared to many other military vehicles. Inside the front you can be up to 6 soldiers, and you can also have one standing as a machine gun operator on the top. So you can be 7 the front section, and in the rear you have up to 11 or 12 people. So in total you can carry 18 soldiers within this vehicle, which is approximately half a platoon. So this is the driver's position with a steering wheel, ordinary car, the automatic transmission and the pedals. It's like driving an ordinary car, but since it's articulated steering, it's made by hydraulics. You turn the two front and rear section, and with this turning you create the steering. So it's very direct, and where the front part of the vehicle goes, you always have the rear in the same tracks. So if you can fit in the vehicle between two trees, the rear part will also go through there. So it's very direct and exact to maneuver in woods, for example. And sometimes it can be quite heavy to steer depending on the terrain, but that's something that you learn how to use the vehicle in the best way. Engine at the front, gearbox, the rear part of the front cabin. So in this rear part of the vehicle you can have soldiers, equipment, you can carry stretchers with wounded soldiers, also carry a lot of load on the roof. There are 11 belted seats for the soldiers to sit on the inside, and this vehicle is not protected whatsoever. It's total plastic, so you would not want to be near the enemy and sitting inside this vehicle. This is a vehicle for transporting the soldiers from an area to the battle zone, and when you reach the battle zone you dismount from the vehicle and then you travel on foot or on skis to where you're gonna do the fighting. So this is not a vehicle suited for enemy terrain or being in when you are fired on, because there's no protection at all, apart from the elements. It doesn't rain on you, you doesn't get exhausted traveling long distances, and you also have heating system inside, so it's warm on the inside in this vehicle, which is not always the case in a military vehicle. But the heating system in the rear and in the front part is absolutely fantastic. You don't have to complain about the cold winter conditions. If it's minus 35 or 40 degrees Celsius on the outside, it's perfectly comfortable on the inside. There is also a communication system which I will show you how to communicate from the rear part of the vehicle to the front part. Quite useful, and a lot of these vehicles, they were sold to civilian companies, fire brigades, rescue services, power network companies traveling to fix the electric cables out in the wilderness, etc. So they have been used in various different kind of situations where you need to be able to travel where no one even can walk. So it's a fantastic vehicle apart from the protection. So now I'm in the driver's position of the BV206 with V6 petrol engine and 4-speed automatic gearbox. Quite easy to drive, but you have to think and be a bit careful so you don't get stuck in the mud or the snow. You can actually get stuck, or you can tilt with it, but if you know what you're doing, it's a fantastic vehicle. And the noise inside is quite much, so you need to have ear protection and you're not able to talk to the rest of the crew in the cabin. That's one of the drawbacks when you're driving this vehicle. The noise level inside is a bit too much. But apart from that, it's a fantastic vehicle. So when you reach the point where you're going to leave this vehicle and carry on foot, or in this case on skis, you have the half platoon back in the rear cabin, and then you dismount from the vehicle. And when we went to the military academy, we had to act as infantry soldiers as well on skis up in the northern part of Sweden. And we stopped the vehicle and we jumped out of the vehicle, and all of a sudden when you jump out, you are up to here in snow. So you have the head down here, and now the time comes to unload the skis, the weapon, the equipment. And when you're standing in the snow and you have the skis up here and a lot of equipment including weapons, and you're gonna be able to climb up onto the skis and then carry on to where you're gonna do your fighting. At that moment I realized I'm so happy that I'm in the tank force, that I haven't to go on skis in 1.5 meter of snow in the cold conditions. I can be inside my tank. To communicate from the front to the rear and reverse, you have a very ingenious signal system with a button here and a button at front. So you can have signals depending on if there is an accident at the rear, or if the driver wants you to get out. Now we have stopped, all clear to dismount from the vehicle. So you have a system of different signals that you can send back and forth. Otherwise you have to wait and then you can talk on the outside. We didn't have mobile phones at the time, so we couldn't talk to each other or radio communication. So this was the simplest way, but it works. So this is a fantastic vehicle in many cases.